You had to remember to hit record. We invite you to learn more about and support our organization by visiting our website at socan.eco, Ashland-climate-action, and I'll put that in the chat when I get a chance. While our focus is climate action, we recognize that climate change is one of several serious overarching strategic issues that concern our community, including fire risk, drought, economic resilience, air quality, public health, food security, also having fun and getting along with each other and enjoying this beautiful place. Climate change is one issue that's intrinsically connected to all of these issues. So addressing these requires sustainable long-range solutions and call upon us as citizens to come together within our community just as much as they call for leadership from our elected officials and city staff. So these are not business as usual times. How do we rise to this occasion? Tonight's program is intended to be both practical and philosophical, with tips on getting involved in local affairs, as well as reflections on our responsibilities for strengthening our local civil society. We're excited tonight to partner with Local Innovation Works. LIW was formed in 2020 to support recovery and resilience in Southern Oregon. LIW supports and trains emerging leaders in values-aligned social and commercial organizations. We are absolutely thrilled that Ashland Mayor Julie Akins and City Manager Pro Tem Gary Milliman accepted our invitation to be with you here tonight for this event. We hope this will be the first of many conversations with community leaders. I also want to thank SOCAN and my colleagues at the Ashland Climate Action Project for their invaluable support in developing this program. Louise Shawkat, Linda Peterson-Adams, Joanne Eggers, and Kathy Conway, and my best friend, partner, and technical assistant, Bob Kaplan. Before I yield the microphone, it's my job to mention a few logistics. So this program is being recorded for future viewing. All microphones are muted. And we are not offering live chat during the program in order that we can all stay present and focused on the conversation. And we'll be sending you a feedback form following the program. There you'll have a chance to send us any questions that arise for you based on tonight's discussion, and we will do our best to find answers to your questions. And the feedback form also asks for your recommendations for future guests and topics that can help strengthen our community. And now I'd like to introduce my friend and colleague, Stephen Sloan of Local Innovation Works. Stephen?
Thank you, Lori, and welcome everyone. It's an honor to be here and to be hosting this conversation. This is a lot of what I've been doing lately. I've been a business consultant and a leadership development person in my past lives, but the last year or so has called us into local community conversation facilitation. So I do that with Reimagine and Rebuild Rogue Valley, which is really kind of working in fire recovery and trying to turn kind of tragedy into transformation in the valley at large, across all the sectors and across all the kind of pillars of economy and education and community rebuilding, etc. I want to, so it's great for me to be here with all of you and hosting this conversation. And our intention here is to have this be a conversation, an exploration of what might be next, right? Of course, we acknowledge the challenges that our city and our community face these days. But that's not what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to be talking about, okay, we have a history of being a very creative and collaborative community. This has been true since the 1800s when the Chautauqua movement first started. You know, it didn't start here, but first started in our town. It came to our town, and that's still alive in OSF and the Grange Co-op and so many other things. So that's the spirit that in which I come this evening. So there will be no fireworks, there will be no gotchas, there will be none of that. This is about a creative exploration. We have a citizens participation plan. It's posted on the website of the city. It was drafted in February 2000. It is a great document. It is what we aspire to do, and the world has changed a lot since February of 2000. And so how might we change? How might we change how we work together? So with that, let's have our mayor, Julie Akins, introduce herself quickly. Welcome, Julie.
Hi, thank you very much. I really just want to say I appreciate you doing this and the spirit in which you're doing it. I think you're right that we have this history of collaboration and creativity, and we're not going to move forward without that, without everybody's voices in the mix and speaking respectfully and creatively. I'm really anxious to roll up my sleeves and work with everybody in the solutions, because they're never going to come from the top down. I believe that things boil up, bubble up. So the idea of, just a single person, a mayor solving problems, that's a model that isn't really true and accurate. That said, I am here to do what I can to set the vision, and I'm really appreciative to be able to do that. I recognize that that's a pretty big honor at a very difficult time in our nation and in our state and our county and here in Ashland. So not easy, but certainly worthy. And I'm happy to be here. Thanks for the opportunity to be in a less constructed environment where I can lean into a little bit more of a jovial and entertaining evening. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for leading us in these difficult times. And Gary Milliman, welcome. Would you like to give a little background on yourself?
Sure. Very happy to be here assisting the city of Ashland and the city council and the mayor through this time, bridging the period until the first non-interim city manager is selected. That process is in progress, and I think we'll be seeing the fruits of that soon. But I come from a variety of backgrounds. My education is in journalism, and initially worked in that industry as a newspaper reporter and editor, but found my way into public service in Los Angeles County with the city of Bell Gardens, a city of about 30,000 population, served there, several other cities in California, including Cotati, in Fort Bragg, and Southgate later, back in Los Angeles County, a city of about 105,000. And intermixed with that, I served as a member of a city council on a variety of regional and statewide boards of commissioners and advisors. But the focus of my, I guess the primary focus of my interest has always been in emergency management and in transportation. More recently, I retired from the city of Brookings in 2018 after 11 years as the city manager there. My second retirement in this life, and have been serving pro bono as a senior advisor with the International City Management Association since 2018, and also as a municipal court judge. So I'm currently serving as the municipal court judge in 5 rural Oregon cities. So trying to stay current and pursue my interests. I find it's value to me personally to assist city managers, to assist citizens who are having difficulty negotiating through the legal process, and to assist cities in dealing with issues that arise that need special attention.
Great. Thank you for helping us as a community, and thank you for all the things that you do. I actually want to interject here, go off a little bit off script, because I think that there's a beautiful piece of hope in our community, and it's with young women, because this is a little close to home, but last night, probably none of you know, but last night the Ashland High School women's water polo team won the state championship for the first time in decades. And talk about a group of young women who have shown us what courage and strength and hopeful action can make possible. It's quite remarkable to be there, and to know one of the young women on the team, who is my daughter. And so I just want to put that into us as a community, right? They represent so much of what we believe in and what is possible for us. So thank you, Julie and Gary, for being here. And I just want to open the conversation with this question of how can we reignite positive energy and capacity for visionary leadership in our community? It's not gone, but how can we light the fire in a new way now? Julie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. That's a tough question, right? I don't think there's any one answer to that, but you're getting at it, and it dovetails in your statement a second ago about young women in this community. I think part of the way that we reignite imagination, creativity, and really get around a vision is by involving everybody. I think that the city of Ashland, with what I don't believe intended this to happen, but has become an aging city. A decade ago, it was 13% of people who were 65 and older, and now it's something like 30%. So I think to reignite the vision and the creativity, we need to invite more folks to the table. We need to be a community that brings in young people and be a community where you can go to high school here, you can go to university here, and you can graduate and get a job and buy a house and raise your kids here. I think that those sort of long routes help a community. And I also think inviting young people to the table is where you get the good ideas, where you get the forward thinking ideas. I mean, I hear your story and I think, I'm pre-Title IX. There weren't any athletic teams for women in my high school. And then I think about where we are now with young women. And those things make a difference in terms of how we view ourselves. I was recently at a supermarket stopping to get some lion's mane mushrooms, and they were really beautiful, right? And Oregon is so famous for incredible fungi, and I won't nerd out, but I'm a huge mushroom fan. And so I'm there and I'm looking at them, and this woman is there with her two daughters, and the little girl goes, "What are those?" And I said, "Oh, those are lion's mane mushrooms. Let's talk about mushrooms," and getting all animated and having this conversation. And the mother says, "Hey, that's our mayor, Julie." And the little girls were like, "Huh, what?" And I thought, "Oh yeah, why would they care about politics? That's silly." And I just kept talking. And then the mother later hit me up on through social media and said, "My daughters could not believe it. They thought it was such a big deal that the mayor stopped and talked to them, and that the mayor's a girl." And I thought, see, this is how things change over time. It's not necessarily even the doing as much as it is the being. A person who is holding that space for the person to come up behind, and the being of the person who has the ladder there intact for people to go up and down it. And it isn't as if being the mayor is some sort of pinnacle. It's just one of the many things that you can do in a community to be helpful. And every single person who serves is helpful at every level that they serve. So that's not my point, but it's that way of just being that light, being that creativity, stopping and being excited about where you live and what you do and the opportunities that are here. I think we reignite through just, I don't know, through that sense of accomplishment, but also play. Sometimes we forget to play, to laugh, to see each other in a jovial kind of way. Especially, everything has been such a grind. Am I right? It's like we had the presidential election and it was just grinding gears. And then it's COVID and it's this, it's that. It's been one thing after another that has forced us all in our houses. And I'll speak for myself. There are times I've forgotten to smile. There are times I've forgotten to crack myself up. I write little comedy sketches for fun, right? I haven't written a single one in like a year. I want to get back to that, into the creative play, into enjoying each other's company, the sunshine of each other's smiles. And I think from there, we begin to grow something bigger. We know the problems. I think we do. We could identify those tonight and talk about it. And maybe some folks would see it differently. And I think to some degree, we have a sense of solutions, but nothing happens unless we come together in a way of willingness. So I hope I didn't meander too much there, but that's.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you. And we'll dive into some of those questions as we go. Gary, how about you in your career and in all the communities that you've seen? How have you seen this happen? Is it possible?
I have, and first I'd like to contribute to your opening comment there, Stephen. I'm an Eagle Scout, and this month, Ashland will be honoring one of the first female Eagle Scouts in history. An Ashland resident, Magnolia Snowbridge, is having her Eagle Scout Court of Honor as a member of the first class of female Eagle Scouts next week. So that's in my experience, that's a milestone of women's leadership, young women's leadership as well. So congratulations to the team, and congratulations to Magnolia and others who are pursuing what used to be unconventional roles in business, politics, and management. My first job with the city back in Bell Gardens in 1971 was handling public relations, and the assignment was to inform the public about what the city is doing. Well, there's been a watershed change, and it continues to change since that time. It's no longer a situation where you have a city council and management making decisions and then pushing the rationale for those decisions out to the community. Now it's community. It's called community engagement. And we need to be pulling information in from the public about what the community's needs are, how they think we're providing service. Are the services that we are providing still relevant to them? Are we providing those services in appropriate ways to serve all members of our community in an equitable way? And provide us with that community input as a part of the city council's policy making role and the city manager's management role. And I think as we move into this council manager plan over the next several months, I mean, it's already adopted, but quite frankly, it's not been fully implemented. I think there's an opportunity to enhance that community collaboration between City Hall and the community. I think any new city manager that you hire is going to be thinking more collaboratively than they were 50 years ago when I started the business, or even 3 years ago. When I attended the City Managers Conference here in August, the Oregon City Managers Conference, the biggest topic was, how do we do a better job at collaborating with the community? And some cities in Oregon have developed outstanding programs to collaborate with their community. And I'm going to leave behind some information about those programs with the city as I depart. It's something that I don't think the interim city manager should be trying to develop and implement. It's a program that needs to be developed over time. But I think as we define the role of the city council being the policy making role, where they are the key people communicating to, listening from, soliciting information from the public, and then making those policy decisions and moving those policy decisions to the city manager for implementation. I think as the community understands that system that they have adopted better, that system works well internationally. Over 9,000 communities across the world utilize this system of government. So as we move forward, I've arranged for some workshops, not only for the city council, but also for the community. We're waiting for the time when we can have those workshops in person. But those workshops are contracted for to provide an opportunity for a fuller understanding of the council manager plan and how implementing that plan will have a direct impact on this very topic that we're discussing tonight.
So you're waiting for the new manager to come in and to be able to do these workshops live, or will they be able to be handled virtually if that's necessary?
I think we're going to try to do both.
Okay.
So that people in the community can participate in whichever manner is comfortable for them.
So without giving away all the goods on these new kind of programs that you heard about at your conference, I'm curious, and our next question, is really the world has changed, right? We have social media, we have COVID, we have all kinds of polarization and all kinds of other challenges these days. What did you hear at your conference, Gary, that makes you think, how might we move in a direction that will work given our new circumstances?
I know that there was a staffing change here with respect to the community relations aspect of the city manager's office. And I see more cities going the opposite direction by either restoring or having someone designated within the manager's office that focuses on that function, that is in constant communication through social media. We receive a lot of emails to the city council and administrative email addresses from folks who are inquiring about everything from, this tree down the street that needs attention, or providing input on items that are on the city council agenda. And so that needs to be a part of the community engagement program, is reviewing and making sure that those inquiries get attended to, but also pushing out how to be engaged with your council and your city management through that vehicle, through social media, and through other opportunities. So some of these communities have woven together a number of aspects of their community engagement, which I think could serve as a model for something that Ashland could do and build on. I'm not an advocate of necessarily adopting someone else's program as your own, but at least you can review the job that has been done by others and see how that is applicable to your community, and then use the resources within your community to build on it or modify it or take it to the next step. So I think it's going to be an exciting opportunity for the new city manager to work with your mayor and council and the community to get that going.
Thank you.
If I can jump in on that.
Absolutely.
I tend to think that it is the responsibility, among the responsibilities at any rate, of the mayor and council to communicate and engage with the community. I tend to think that it's my responsibility to go on social media and talk to people, to answer their emails, to answer their phone calls. And I have long wanted and hope that at some point soon, I'll be able to have a space on the city website to talk about what's going on from a mayor and council point of view. I do think as the elected officials of this community, it's important for us to engage with the community as well as the community to engage with us. It doesn't work as a one-way dialogue. So I believe it's important for us to be on social media, to be answering those questions via email and phone call. And I do frequently. Sometimes I've been criticized for doing that, but I think that's part of the role so that I can hear what people are talking about, what they're really talking about. and so that I can answer questions and so that I can understand. And so sometimes I can say, well, this is my view of it. What do you think? And then I can get feedback from folks. In fact, there was a really good and lively discussion about the wastewater treatment plant recently on social media on Nextdoor. And it was a good conversation about water and how we use some of our treated water to stock Bear Creek, because water has been in such short supply. And my conversation was around, is that the best we can do? And it got very lively, and I learned a lot, and I think some other folks learned from that. And I think that is part of community engagement. I don't think Ashland lacks for people who want to be involved. If anything, I think pretty much most people here take the opportunity to engage. It's those who don't. It's the younger folks that I want to bring into the tent and hear from them and have them talk to us and engage with us. And I do want to create an environment that's warm and welcoming so that people can come and engage with the city council. I'll say candidly that that's one of the reasons I ran. Gary and I have journalism in our background, and I used to cover City Beat for the newspaper when we had a newspaper of record. And, I noticed that people often felt less than welcomed. And I think we can change that and should. So I'm not denying that that staff can do some engagement with the community and pushing out some messaging. I think that's great. But I also think it's incumbent upon your elected officials to do that. It's my intention to continue to do that and look for more ways, actually.
Mm-hmm. So how is it possible that, given the volume of communication, the number of communication channels that we've got going, right? You've got Facebook, you've got email, you've got Nextdoor, you've got all of these things. How do you find time to keep up with that and all your other responsibilities?
People ask me that a lot, and I'm like, well, I'm not an employee. I find the time because I think it matters. It's important. And it doesn't, I come from 30 years of being a media professional. So it's the water I've been swimming in for decades. So it's not super time consuming for me to jump on and go between platforms and see what people are talking about and weigh in if I think I should, and not if I don't, but at least to make note of what's there. It's not terribly time consuming, and it's absolutely worth my time as your mayor to communicate with you and let you know what's going on. I'm hard pressed to think of anything that's more important than that, except being informed myself and doing what I can in terms of working with counselors on policy decisions. Obviously, that's the number one job. Next to me is communicating and engaging with the community. So it's not that time consuming. It's not that hard.
How about the emotional tenor of what's going on there? I admit I am not on Facebook very much, and I watched Nextdoor for a week or so, and I was like, this is not a conversation that I really want to be involved in. This is why I'm not a politician, right? But how do you contextualize that within your own life and hold all of the, because sometimes we don't talk to each other the same way online as we do face to face. How do you hold that?
Well, I think it's fair to say that I know that, that I don't think that some of the things that are said online, people would say to me directly if we were sitting across from each other. I tend to doubt that they would, but if they would, they would. It's a practice like anything else. I think it's important to remind oneself that it is not about me. It's not any conversation that's being had. It's not personal to me. It's the job. It's being the mayor. You have to develop calluses around those things. And some days I do a great job and sail right through. And other days, I get my feelings hurt. And then I sit myself down and have that conversation. But I think in general, it just goes with the gig. You have to be able to answer the decisions that are made. That's accountability. And you have to be willing to be held accountable. And when you make a mistake, you have to be willing to own that. And you have to be willing to explain why you think the way you do and what decisions you're making and why you're making them, because people have a right to know that. Again, as a lifelong journalist, I spent my whole career holding politicians accountable, and it is rather ironic that I'm in this chair now. And that doesn't escape me. But I believe in it. I believe in an informed electorate. I believe an informed electorate makes good decisions. How else will they be informed? You can use traditional media outlets, but those are few and far between. The concept of an objective media has fallen on very hard times. So people seek out ways that they can to get information. And some of those ways are the social media platforms you're speaking of. And sometimes it gets wild and woolly, for sure. But got to be willing to stand up and be counted and say what you believe is true and engage in conversation in the most positive way that you can.
Thank you for that. And thank you for stepping into that and holding it that way, the way you do. Gary, I'm curious about, from a staff perspective, Facebook, we have a whole community of 20,000 plus people all talking at their leisure, and staff is, in the modern era, expected to respond in some cases to these to these conversations. How could they possibly keep up? And how do you hold an official position amidst that level of conversation?
You can't. You can't keep up. I can't keep up. Members of the staff can't keep up. We receive dozens of inquiries a day. So if it's a simple question that we can respond immediately to, if it comes into me, I will often send it to one of the department managers who has the expertise in that area to provide a brief response or a direction to where people can find the information. If it's requires a more detailed response, particularly if it takes some time to do the research, we don't have the capacity to do research projects for individuals who are making those requests from the public. We do those for counselors. If they're looking for a record, there's a public records process through the city recorder's office, and some people don't like that because it's can be tedious. But that process was established so that we can identify and record what information is being requested and what information that's being provided, so that there's a clear understanding of what's understood as coming in and going out. If it goes beyond the simple inquiry, something we can't quickly look up and send a response back, then usually I tell them, the people who are, I try to catch them all. Some get missed, and I can't have ongoing dialogues with folks on because Facebook's not the only thing I do. Email's not the only thing I do. So after a few exchanges of information, sometimes information that someone might be disagreeing with, we need to end the conversation at some point and pick it up in a different forum, like at budget time. So in some cases, we have to manage the conversation simply because of limitations of time, and by having a lot of interactive conversation with one particular party is diverting your ability to respond to others. So I hate to call it managing the conversation, but to some extent, that's what it is.
It sounds like, so I'm curious about how citizens can, it sounds like if there's kind of policy questions and which direction are we going in, that would come to an elected official who, and electeds in this day and age are expected to be watching social media and be engaged in that conversation. Julie, that sounds like what you're saying. It's part of the job today.
I mean, I think that is part of the job today. And I think that, you know, I don't think it's my job to tell the residents of Ashland exactly how they get information and where, but certainly they can write to city staff, and staff does their best. You know, the city manager is really the first stop there. You know, unless you have specific business with the development department or, you know, something. But you can interact with city staff and absolutely should feel totally comfortable interacting with your elected officials. We owe you answers. Is it true that I answer absolutely every email just in case anyone wants to check that? No, I don't. I'd like to do better with that, to be honest. But sometimes there will be what are pretty clearly campaigns, you know, where I'll get like 25 emails and they all say the same thing with a different signature line. And I understand the purpose of that and totally respect that level of activism and engagement. But I don't need to answer every person on that because it's the same, you know, it's a copied and pasted message. But I do read them all. And I do consider what everyone has to say, absolutely. And I respond to as many of them as I can. And the same is true with social media. Sometimes I just read it and don't engage, and sometimes I do engage, depending on whether or not I think I can advance the conversation or there'll be some benefit in my engagement. But I'm paying attention to it all the time.
And,
So
and
interesting.
the questions and information that comes in from the public is very valuable. And I take it seriously. I mean, there are instances where folks are expressing frustration about how to find information on the city's website or whatever. And so that prompts us to think, well, what are we missing here? What can we do better? How can we make that information easier to find? Why do they have to come through and talk to the city manager to find something that they should be able to find easier? So it does prompt us to rethink how we do things. And we also get suggestions, sometimes of a technical nature, that good thinking, good suggestion. We can take a look at that, an alternative approach. We don't know the answers. So it's very helpful to get some of those responses so we can take a look at doing things in a different way.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious about this because, you know, luckily we live in a fairly small town by choice, most of us. And so we can do this. It sounds like this is kind of like a marketplace of ideas. Really, you get 25 emails with the same content with different signatures, right? And we're expecting as a community, staff and electeds to sort out the votes, right? Or the good ideas from the kind of wacky ideas, right? Around some technical issue. Is that fair as a community to ask staff and electeds? Electeds are not paid very well at all. I mean, it's really a volunteer job, right? Yeah, and staff is super capable, super committed people, and there's just too much to be done, right? So how can we as a community, is it really fair to have you be the arbiters in this marketplace of ideas? What alternative is there?
It's totally fair. I mean, it just goes with it. In my view, it's totally fair. And I shouldn't have said zero. I think it's like $200 a year or something. But yeah, I think it's fair. You know, if you stand up and say, I'm a person who's willing to take this on, then that's what you mean. And how else are people going to get their ideas across? How else are they going to find an avenue for their creativity in terms of what they see in the community as a good idea, as a way to move things forward? And to be honest, I don't really think we get a lot of wacky ideas. Most of the emails and information that I see are people with very well-reasoned and researched ideas, and they tend to be pretty right on. They tend to be things that are based on what's already happening or what they've seen in other communities or what they've been involved in other communities that have been successful. this is a really smart place, as you well know, as a smart person. There are a lot of people doing good things here. So I don't really get a lot of wacky ideas. In fact, I kind of get a kick out of it when I do. Sometimes I wish I got a few more of them, because I don't really get too many of them. We get people who disagree. We get some people who may have some particular pet conspiracy theory around things. That's okay. Where when people complain that people don't trust their government and they're upset by that, I kind of have to say, well, what did we expect? Not so much on a local level, but on a national level, I don't think national politics have kept up with what average Americans need and want. And I think that it's reasonable that people may have some trust issues. I mean, we don't even have universal health care, and then we have this massive pandemic and we're trying to make something up from scratch so that people can get appropriate medical care in a pandemic. To me, it's ridiculous. So yeah, I mean, I realize that's not my lane. I'm not in national politics, but I think to myself, well, yeah, people are untrusting. I get it. I understand why. And I understand why that lack of faith might trickle down to a local level. And sometimes it does. And sometimes people are really upset and don't understand why certain problems that seem obvious have not yet been fixed. I share your frustration. Everything in government takes a lot longer than I think anybody in government wishes it did. Certainly takes a lot longer than, I went in naive, I thought, oh, wow, I'm gonna just do all these things. Yeah. Things take a lot longer, but they still do get done. And they do get done with all of us pushing that rock up the hill together. They get done faster and better and are more long lasting.
Gary, thank you for that, Julie. And I think I'm curious about, from the staff perspective, Gary, why does it take longer? Is it because you're having to consider, we get hot on the issue of climate change. Sorry, that was a bad pun. But city staff needs to think much more holistically about the issue before implementing a solution to whatever the issue is. Is that part of what's slowing it down? Or
Sure,
what's your sense?
it may seem that it's slow, and in some cases it is. But here's what we have to deal with in the staff land, and that is that elected officials at various levels, not just the city, have established goals and policies and rules and regulations, and regulatory agencies have established the same over decades, which overlap and sometimes get in the way of each other. Some of them are not consistent. So there are issues that you have to consider, such as liability, following the procedures that have been established for review of proposals at various levels. Not only building construction, but environmental concerns and equity concerns. We have all of these layers of review that need to be accomplished before we can move along. We need to take into consideration financing, funding availability, alternative ways of financing, staff capacity to actually manage the project. The capability of your staff. Do you need to retain consulting services? What are the legal issues? If you move too quickly without hitting all of the boxes, what jeopardy does that put you into? So it's I'm absolutely sure that it is frustrating for many as to how slowly things move along a lot of the time. It's frustrating for me too, particularly when I'm dealing with in the realm of dealing with other levels of government. Frustrations on getting approvals through those entities. And that can often contribute to impacting the project locally. We've been working on getting this emergency access to Highway 5. And ODOT's on board with it. We're working through the issues, and then suddenly there's a staff change at the Federal Highway Administration. And now they're reviewing it further. It's one of those things where we thought we were there, but now a new set of what I call bureaucratic policymakers are looking at it, and it's stuck again. So you never know what little sticking point you're going to encounter right around the corner. And it's a real challenge for the staff to think ahead about all of those things and make sure that all the bases are covered. And sometimes you don't know what the bases are.
Mhm.
Well, and funding, happens, funding changes, funding streams change. There are state laws, I came in pretty ginned up about affordable housing index to income. I'm still very excited about doing what we can around that. But, we can't just do what we want. There are state land use policies, there are precedents, there are legal issues with planning around building. And there's everybody. You can't just decide, well, this is what's good for this neighborhood. Everybody who lives in that neighborhood gets to weigh in on that. So some folks may not be interested in seeing multifamily apartment style dwellings in their neighborhood that might add more stock to affordable housing or housing for young college students, but might affect, the value of their particular property. So everybody, when you're dealing with a ship with 21,000 people and everybody on that ship is just as important as everybody else, it's a constant balancing act. And then keep in mind that, while it's the city of Ashland and it belongs to us, it doesn't belong only to us. It also belongs to the state of Oregon and the county of Jackson, and it's right next to California, and our policies affect people who live on the other side of the border. So it gets into a lot of complexity, which I think everybody understands, and I think most people know that it's complex, but those complexities, as Gary says, tends to slow things down. But it doesn't mean that we don't make progress, because we do make progress. Snowberry is an example. The second phase of Snowberry is soon to be open. That's affordable housing on the south end of town off Clay Street. They do a terrific job. The Regional Housing Authority and the city of Ashland works with them, and progress has been made. So, and that's just one of many projects that are underway and planned for this community, and there'll be more. But yeah, stuff takes time, but I think it's supposed to, a quick, I don't want to go off too much on a tangent here, but we established a new commission, the Social Equity and Racial Justice Commission. And we were fortunate to bring in members from this community who are heavy hitters in all walks of life, pretty big time players in their various careers. And they came together, and there was some initial frustration about how public commissions work. It's like, how can we get anything done? We have to just be able to get around the table and talk and make stuff happen. It's like, no, because the other person who's in that commission is every resident living in Ashland, right? So you have to set the table. Everything you do, the table is set for every person who lives there to participate. For that to happen, they have to know when these meetings are, what are said at the meetings, who attended, what happened, and next steps. And that you can't have that conversation in private. Everything you do has to be discussed in public. And why? Because it's for the public. It's about the public, for the people, by the people. It's cumbersome, and it's also incredibly beautiful.
And so I'm glad you brought up commissions. Can you tell us, is that the place where if we're really interested in contributing to our community with passion and great ideas and clear thinking, is that where people should be plugging in and finding out who's on that commission and taking them to coffee or joining the commission themselves? Like, where is that power spot? It's clearly not the 2 minutes at the council meeting, right? Your public commentary. It seems like it's too late in the process.
I would say, I don't want to interrupt you there, but I would say don't do that. I actually think that's very powerful. I think that, I know, I see your face there, but I think the 2 to 3 minutes where you actually have uninterrupted time to talk to council is a big deal. Because we absolutely positively listen. And we have this unfortunate thing by council rule that we can't respond. And we can't say attaboy, we can't ask you questions, we can't interact. I try to do it with my face, like, yeah, okay, keep talking, you know, to let them know they're heard. But it's actually a big deal. And it is valuable to take advantage of those opportunities. It's valuable to attend council meetings. It's valuable to speak on given issues. So there's public forum where you get your 3 minutes, but then you can also talk about everything on that agenda if you want to. So yeah, I think that engagement's key. I think knowing what's going on is where it all starts. And that's not as easy as it used to be, as we discussed earlier. But I think, you know, pop in and watch the council meetings when you have a minute. You know, if you don't have a minute, you know, check it out on TV and fast forward through the RVTV to the moment that you are concerned. Check out what's on the agendas. If it's something you want to talk about, show up for that. Those are all levels of engagement that matter. Your emails show up and we do read them, and that does matter. Picking up the phone and calling your elected official counts. Sure, of course, if you want to serve on a commission, that's another way to have your voice heard. Elections are a very important way to have your voice heard. When there's an upcoming measure on the ballot, man, study up and cast your vote. That's the key way that you are heard. So they're all levers. And while it may not feel like it matters on a national level, and I can't speak to that, locally it matters all to heck. We absolutely hear you talking. And I think that every elected official and staff person, I would be surprised if there's an exception to this. Every one of us care very deeply about what we're told.
The reason that I was, thank you for that. The reason I was kind of concerned about the 2 or 3 minute, you know, comment periods, because many proposals are formed much earlier and staff has put in a huge amount of time and decisions have been made that are structural to the solution. And citizens have a hard time understanding. I think this is a generalization, but it seems like a lot of people aren't sure where their input can have the highest leverage. And I'd love to hear both of you speak to that. Like how do big decisions, you know,
Okay.
where, you know, at what point are those high leverage points? You know, it seems earlier in the process, you can have more influence on the design of the solution than later in the process. So,
Well, Gary will
comments?
probably be more lengthy about this, but I'll say every step of the way, there's a chance for input. There is a stop every point of the way where you can give your input. But go ahead, Gary. I'm sure you'll have more detail on that.
I would agree with that. But you're talking about the commissions. I think we have 20 commissions now. And a lot of them, or they're all somehow connected to a department that's generating information and recommendations that will ultimately come to the city council for some policy action or direction on a budget item. Yeah, I think there is value to participating in those commissions. It puts you in the same room with staff members who are working on some really important projects and allocating resources and bringing recommendations to the city council. And those staff members make every effort to incorporate the thoughts and views of those commission members and people who go to the commission meetings as they put those reports and recommendations together. So yeah, if you're looking for the canary, it's probably those commissions. But that direct input at the city council, I agree, is very valuable. It's not unusual in Ashland to have a lot of community input. I think that you know, the way that social media has developed over the last few years has increased the volume, has increased the accessibility to your elected officials. So, and the staff. So we need to come up with new ways of dealing with that increased availability to be able to listen to folks and reach out to them. But you know, from the times early in my career where people would walk over to me at the greeting time in church and ask me about a particular issue, or sometimes more than ask me, voice their opinion about it. There have always been opportunities to interact with your local elected officials and your city manager. I believe that when your new city manager comes on board, he or she will be more accessible out in the public and engaging than I am. You know, I'm not a resident of Ashland, so I'm not here on the weekends engaging folks like the council members are, or like the future city manager will. So there are a lot of ways to express your views, get your opinion in the mix, contribute your experience to the greater Ashland experience, and look for those ways and get in there and get involved.
It sounds like the commissions are also an amazing place to learn in detail early in the process about what options are being considered and how the idea is being structured. Is that true?
I think it is. I think it's very true.
Yeah, so I think if we just watch the paper or watch the council meeting afterwards, then it seems like things might already be baked, but it sounds like in the commissions is where the recipe is being designed more.
Sometimes.
That in the budget process.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say sometimes that's true. I wouldn't say it's universally true. We have a lot of commissions. So, you know, sometimes certainly the commissions report to council every year, and we hear the ideas coming out of commission. Ultimately, the decisions, most of the decisions, of course, are made at council level. Planning commission is a quasi judicial body, so things are slightly different there. But most of those things wind up before council anyway. So there's lots of, I guess my point there is not to be down on commissions. They're terrific, and I'm glad that we have them, and they're a way for community to engage. But just know that there are steps along the way. Even if it's already to council and you're not in favor of it, you could speak out about that, and things can change. They happen all the time. It happens all the time. And sometimes votes are made, and council may be in a certain place at that time and say they don't want this. And then 6 months later, you know, there's a reversal of fortune. I can think of I don't want to get into controversy here, but there was a measure when I first was on council that I was passionately against. It passed. I had to lick my wounds and move on. Came up a year later, and it wasn't even brought forward as a thing to continue. So it's like, what a difference a year can make. And part of the reason that happened is because from the time that it was first proposed to that following year, people were weighing in early and often on it. And also council and staff were looking at data as it came in and went, you know what? Yeah, let's not go forward with that. So things can change all the way along the process. Things that are done can be undone. It's lots of opportunities to engage and shift the forward motion or backward motion all along the way. So don't despair if you feel like things aren't going the way that you want them to. Hang in there and keep engaging, because things have a way of changing.
I just want to call out, I watched your last council meeting where there was the big conversation around the study around the waste treatment plant. And it was interesting, Julie, to hear you talk about the conversation that you witnessed and were involved with on next door, and you that proposal was modified to prioritize the environmental water flow impact and possibility of that project, right? And council adjusted on the fly, it seemed, to take that into consideration as a kind of circuit breaker on that whole idea.
I think it was a really important conversation that initially, you know, there are lots of elements each in every possibility. And, you know, money is always a big part of a discussion, but money is not everything. You know, I often say the city wants to make good business decisions, but the city is not a business. So there's lots of different like ways that you can look at things. And I think that's true that the environmental factor and the water going into Bear Creek became a big part of that dialogue. I hope it's okay if I say, I don't want that dialogue to end. I still hope that at some point a proposal will come forward again to do a water study just on that portion, because I still think there's probably a different way to get water into Bear Creek than merely to use treated water. I do think there's, because it's still not the cleanest, best water. It's still too hot. You know, DEQ keeps telling us that, and every community deals with this. So I do think there's probably something better that we could look to do. And I do hope that at some point we study that and look to do that better, because I agree, we need these fish runs. We need to take care of our wildlife. We're Oregon, we're Ashland, Oregon. I mean, environment is who we are. So I don't think anybody downplays that, but I definitely want to see that study come back again for consideration. And that's the long game of politics, right? You have to just keep waiting for that opportunity to get in the loop again and have that conversation and see how that goes as you move forward, because I don't know if anything's ever a hard no. It's just a not now.
Mm-hmm. I'm wondering, so, you know, we have our fish friends and we have climate, we have all of these kind of point issues, right? These very, people become very passionate, and rightfully so, about each of these issues. But I want to return to this idea of kind of having a more holistic view and looking at and becoming citizens who are capable of understanding some of the complexities, right, that we must address, right? You mentioned legal and environmental and, you know, economic, the financial, all these things. Do you think, I mean, how do we educate ourselves as citizens? How do we as a community make sure that we are all coming to this with the kind of the biggest frame and the most sophisticated frame that we can put, you know, we can gain in the time that we have available, because we're not paid staff, obviously.
I mean,
Have you seen that work well in other communities?
I'm just going to jump in and say, I think that anybody can do it if I can do it.
Mhm.
So if you have the interest, and you do because you're here, if you have the interest in doing it, you can do it. You can jump in and engage and understand the issues, and what you don't understand, you can get a buddy to help you understand. You know, going through the budget is a huge process, and I looked at it all kinds of different ways with all kinds of different people, and received different input and questions, and it helped me understand it better. Do I have it committed to memory? No, but I have it on my desk and I look at it often. So I think it's that. I think if you want to engage, if you want to understand how things become policy, it's totally available to you. That's what's beautiful about OpenGov. You can look at everything that we have, everything that I have access to, you have access to, everything that I could know, you could know. So, you know, I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Sure, it does. And in some communities, I think even Ashland, I heard here that like 2017 or so, there was a thing called Team Ashland, where people went to each department and learned over some months about how the city works. I know there's Leadership Houston that does similar things across that community. Hey, Gary, you seem to be nodding. Are you aware of these programs? Are they effective? Are they something we should try?
I don't know if it exists in Ashland or in Jackson County. There was a similar program, Leadership Curry, when I was serving in Brookings, and Leadership Mendocino when I was serving in Fort Bragg as the city manager there. So I know those programs exist. I don't know the status of them in Ashland. They tend to have a limited number of participants, but that information does spread out into the community as a part of that cohort of folks who do an intensive deep dive into local government, not only city but county in Curry County. So yeah, I think those kinds of activities and initiatives are beneficial.
I also think in fairness, most people, so I live near student family housing, around a lot of young people. And I think it's fair to say that most people are really busy and engaged in trying to live their best life now and also trying to survive. So, between work and family and, eking out what enjoyment they can, people are pretty busy. So I think it's important for us, for Gary and myself and the council and other staff to be willing to take the time to break it down and give you information in bite-sized pieces. And obviously, if you want more, there's more to be had. But I do think it's important, and that's why that engagement piece keeps coming up. It's important to say, hey, this is what's coming up on council. This week, this is what's going on. And these are the things we're discussing. And here's what these things potentially mean to you as a resident living here. So people can kind of figure out where they want to jump in the loop, what they want to engage with and what they don't. Not everything we do is going to be fascinating and important to every person here, right? So it just depends on where you want to pick up and be involved. But I do think there's value in getting the heads up on that, because I don't, it's really, it would be difficult if you weren't serving to be involved in that on a deep dive level on a regular basis. The reason that I was able to pay attention to city politics is I was getting paid to do that as a reporter. So I attended every meeting because, that's how I got my check. Most people don't have that same opportunity. So I want to be patient about that and not act like everybody should sit around and, read the budget on Sunday evening, as opposed to watching Netflix or, Hulu. So, I hope that's making sense. I think we have to reach out, do a better job of that, frankly.
It's interesting because the community in some ways is answering this question itself, right? With the 5-minute council meeting, reviews, which are funny, but also informative, right? And so I wonder if there is using some video or something way to orient people, at least in some of those touch points that might be really interesting. The other interesting thing that I think is, there's the city budget committee, right? The citizens budget committee. Out of that seems to have come ACEs, right? And a whole set of thinking on the council now, right? Which is really important, right? Fiscal responsibility is critical. And Gary, I'm curious about your experience in Bell and Southgate, right? Because there was in some years, I don't think while you were there, some real accountability issues in those cities, right? So we do need citizens watching the till. So I'm wondering if you can comment on that and how.
Sure. Well, I was an observer of the Bell situation and contributed to a little bit to the recovery there through the International City Management Association. But in Southgate, long story, but I'll try to shorten it. It's a city that experienced a period of political corruption and mismanagement. And one of the problems was that local media had disappeared. So in the day there were a number of local newspapers. I was a reporter and editor for one of those newspapers that covered every city council meeting. And attended every budget meeting and got the information out. And those local media outlets all disappeared, as a part of the trend away from print media and town newspapers. So the folks with nefarious intentions took advantage of that. And they got the city in a position through a variety of reorganizations, bringing on some folks with ill intentions that spirited away from the city millions of dollars to contractors who were making kickbacks to local elected officials. So the city found itself in a situation where it was effectively bankrupt. And a group of citizens put together a grassroots effort consisting of the primary leaders of that were the police union, a group of Hispanic women, and the sort of the old timers club, if you will. So they all banded together and put together some litigation that came against the city, stopped some of the spending. They funded it themselves, and then put together a political action committee and got the attention of the Los Angeles Times. And that prompted the reform movement to take course. So the absence of people watching, the reliance upon the then city approach of making decisions and putting the information out to the public with our spin on it, and cutting off community access, shutting people down at city council meetings. It was a demonstration of everything that could go bad in local government when no one's watching. So the citizens were watching but felt they had no voice until they were able to develop this citizens coalition and get the attention of the Times. And then when the Times got interested in it, then others got interested in it, like the district attorney and the federal attorney, and it got resolved.
So it's really interesting that it took a coalition of local people, interested parties and informed parties, to make that happen.
That's right.
And yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I've been dancing around, right, with our town, and with a lot of point, individual people coming to you. I wonder if there are opportunities for more coalition work in our community. And this is something that Lori and I talk about regularly, and myself and other people in the Valley as well. Not particularly looking at Ashland, but just generally, how do we organize ourselves as a community to really get back to this place of creativity and accountability and clarity of, these are our values, this is how we'd like to live them as a community. Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah. Of course, we don't have that issue in Ashland with the horrendous corruption issue that they had in Southgate and Bell and 4 or 5 other less famous communities in Los Angeles County. But I think when people see the need to come together to address a particular issue in a community, look around for partners. I mean, there may be partners that don't agree with you on a lot of things, but perhaps there is an issue that is rising in the community or in the county, or whatever level. You can set aside differences and come back to those later. and focus on a particular issue that you have in common and that you can stand being in the same room long enough to deal with.
Mhm.
So that's how it came together in Southgate. Those groups, I think, maintained good relationships, but went about their ways after the recall happened and things got back on track. Look for partners, look for folks who have concerns and ideas in common. And with social media, a lot easier to do that today.
No,
Mhm.
I think Ashland does this pretty well already. You mentioned ACEs. That's a group that came together with a specific concern around the city finances. I think there is a strong coalition. I mean, this is put on by SOCAN. I think that's a strong coalition of people who are concerned about environment and give solid input early and often. And I think there are others. I think there's a group called Housing Now that's been doing some work around affordable housing and interesting ideas about how to create more housing in this community. And that's their concern. And they bring that forward. I also think it's important, as Gary says, buddy up, be interested in an issue and come together as a coalition. That certainly helps. That's what grassroots activism is about. And I think it's important also, I would say that I'm not a big fan of political phrasing, but a broad-based coalition. I'll say that I have a broad-based coalition. I mean, I can be on any given day standing on a street corner. In fact, just yesterday, trying to brainstorm with an older lady who is an Ashland resident who is sleeping outside currently and is trying to come up with a solution. I might have that conversation, and then later I might have a conversation with a downtown business owner who's dealing with some issues with their business. And then 10 minutes later, I might be talking to a developer who has, more money than God and is trying to figure out how to do something cool with his money. So it's like there's all different people who you can, as Gary said, sort of buddy up with around a given issue and then affect change in a positive way on that issue and then move to the next one. And I actually would say that Ashland residents are incredibly adept at this and do this early and often. And I think that they do make a difference in that. And I think that we have seen changes, certainly on the city council. We've seen a change in the mayor's office. And I think we'll continue to see changes going forward, some that some of you may like, some that some of you won't like, some that I'll like, some that I won't. But that's democracy in action. It's about, people coming forward and stating their point of view. And it's hoped that in the end, the best decisions are made for the longevity of this community. And I do think that in some way, politics is an act of faith. You have to be willing to believe your electorate. You have to lean into it, listen to it, and act in faith that in the end, your community will survive and be resilient. And I walk the streets of Ashland and I see it constantly. I see constant renewal and resilience. I see it in the businesses. Some come and some go, but there's always activity. There's always change over time. We are evolving as individuals and we are evolving as communities. And I think being willing to evolve with it, being willing to change over time, being willing to listen and engage and form those coalitions, that's how change happens.
So it sounds like you're saying that this has been a messy period and a lot has happened, but underlying it is this bubbling pot of change and creativity and hope. Is that fair?
I mean, I don't know if I would agree that it's been messy. I think that messy, I'm not sure. I think that when you have open dialogue and you're completely willing to see where it goes, it's not as smooth as everybody agreeing all the time. Okay, what do you want to do? Everyone agrees, pound the gavel, next thing. but I think that's a little disturbing. That tells me that not everybody's at the table and not every voice is being heard. When you really open it up and let everyone talk, yeah, things are less planned. Perhaps they may appear less orderly, but I think ultimately that communities and decisions are made. I would say that I don't know if Ashland was family and we had a holiday meal, there would probably be a kids table and there would probably be some grumbling and there would probably be people who didn't like the cranberries, but it doesn't mean that the family dinner was a disaster. It just means that everybody gets to say what they think is true. I don't know if I'm
That's
answering
fair.
that right, but that's how I see it.
That's great. Oh, that's really good. Gary, what's your sense? You have
Well,
way more, much broader experience than we do.
Well, folks have often asked me, how do you survive in this profession in these unwieldy sometimes unwieldy city council meetings, and diverse views, and getting different direction from different elements, not agreeing with recommendations from time to time, and well, that's the nature of the local community and local public affairs. I'm acquainted with cities that have 30-minute council meetings, and the decisions are basically made before the councilors enter the room. That's not messy, but it's also not right, in my opinion. That's not how local government should work. A local government should take in all of the views, have those council meetings where everyone's thoughts are respected and engaged and become part of the mix, and not a lot of cities feel that having a unified view on the city council is the preferred direction to take. It shows that the community has stability. I've heard any number of reasons for that. But I think really stable communities are those that are inviting of all views, and that take the time to be messy, I guess, and coalesce into a single, perhaps not a unanimous singular view, but get as much of a consensus as you can going forward.
Yeah, I agree. I don't, I definitely, there was a time when I first, we've got a bad cold in our house. Sorry for the coughing. There was a time when I first came to council where that was sort of the expectation. Everybody sings off the same song sheet. We get all our ducks in a row. And when we get to the dais, we all just say yes or no, and we don't really debate and argue. And then we go to the next thing. And I've been, had people say, well, why don't you have ducks in a row as mayor before council meetings? And my answer is, it's not democracy. Democracy is not having my ducks in a row. It's every person actually making those decisions in real time on the dais, because that's how it works, because we don't make decisions in private. Our business is public. We are a public entity.
Mhm.
And I'm always conscious that you are in the room. If you are not in the room, then that meeting should not be happening. All of our residents are in the room. Everything we do, everywhere we go, it has to be accessible to you, or it's not real democracy. So yeah, I say, let it fly, to tell us what you think as counselors. Sometimes you'll argue, sometimes it gets a little heated. I'm doing my best to sort of ratchet that part down a little bit, make sure that we say what we think and everyone gets their moment, and then we move on and